Hey everyone, welcome back to our Python series. So in our previous API video, we were calling APIs without the use of a key, and at the end, I kind of hinted on how to use a .env file to securely use your API keys, but in today's video, we are going to be learning how to use an API key in Python. This is how we're going to be able to make sure it's secure using the .env file, as well as avoid accidentally uploading it to GitHub. So we're going to walk through API key storage, making a real API key call, and protecting it using GitIgnore. So why do API keys matter? Well, they unlock third-party services. We're going to be using OpenWeather, but you can even use things like OpenAI and so many more. But hard coding them into your script can be a really big security risk. Anybody who gets your key could rack up usage, cost, or even break your app. So I'm going to be starting along from a fresh project, but if you want to follow along or add it into your own project, totally up to you. What I would suggest doing first is creating the env file for your API key. So where we have start here, we're going to create a new file on Visual Studio Code or your development environment. And when it's asking us to select the file type or enter the file name, we're actually just going to do .env, and we're not going to give it a name. And you'll see that we have a create new file env built in. We're going to hit return, and we're going to select where we want to save this. So I would save this wherever you have your API key Python file. So I'm going to go to my Python folder here, and I'm actually going to create a new folder within the folder, and I'm going to call this one API_example. And I'm going to go ahead and create that and put the .env file in there. So you notice we have a little window here that says, are you sure this is going to be a hidden file? And I'm going to say, yep, I want my key to be hidden. So now in Finder, or if you're on Windows, the File Explorer, let's look at our API example, and you'll notice there's no file in here. But there actually is. So on Mac, if you do Shift-Command period, you can toggle between seeing hidden files. You can even see it a little bit faded like a ghost. Windows, you'll want to navigate to the View tab and then select the Show and check the Hidden Items box. So in our .env file, this is where we're going to be holding our API keys, and you can put as many keys in here as you'd like. For our purposes today, we're going to be using OpenWeatherMap. So I'm just going to call mine OpenWeather_API_key, and then I'm going to have it equal what my key is. So whatever your key is would go here. So really quick, let's go ahead and grab our key. So depending on what API you're using, if you're going to use the same one as me, link in the description below, you want to sign up and create an account. Once you're all signed in, you'll want to go to your My API keys here. And another reason why this is very important, this is a free to use API. So this is why it's really important to have your APIs be safe. So in this case, for this API, for the first 1,000 API calls per day, they're completely free. Even with things like OpenAI's API key, you may only have so many calls. This is why it's a good idea not to share them. So you'll want to go to your My API keys at the top here, and depending on the website, it might be somewhere else, and you'll want to copy and paste your key into that .env file. I'm blurring mine out because I don't want anybody to see this. And now what we can do is we can create our new Python file. So I'm going to create a new file here. I'm going to create a new Python file, and let's go ahead and save it under our API example. And let's call this one, weather API. All right, before we get coding, we are going to make sure that we have .env installed. So what we're going to do is we're going to do pip or pip3 install python-dotenv.env. Let's go ahead and run that. Oh, assuming you spelled install correctly, let's go ahead and run that. 2 L's in install, there we go. And we can see that I already have it installed. If I want to update it, I can. For you, you might have some additional lines. Now let's go ahead and do our imports. So the first one we're going to start with is importing OS. This is because we need to access environmental variables like our API key found within that folder. Then we're going to import requests, and this is going to be important because we're making HTTP requests from our weather API, and we're actually going to then say from .env, all one word, import load_.env. So this is going to load variables from a .env file into the environment. Now let's load our API key from the .env file. So load underscore .env. We're going to use our brackets. I know I keep saying dot when it's like the full word. I hope that's not confusing. Double check the screen if you're not looking at the screen for the code. Next we're going to grab our API key. So I'm just going to combine API underscore key equals, and then we're going to use the os.getEnv. And within the brackets, this is where we're going to reference our API key name from the .env file. So if you want to quickly copy and paste, otherwise mine was OpenWeather underscore API underscore key. So it's going to look for that value with the exact same name, and it's going to grab it safely. Okay, so for this API, if you want to double check the documentation, if you want to grab other things, feel free to do so. We're just going to do a really basic call. So for this API, we need to provide it with a city. So in this case, I'm going to do Toronto. And you can change it to any city if you'd like. So if you want to do your own, then we're going to create a request URL using the API key and the city. So I'm going to establish a URL, and this is going to equal a brackets. And I'm going to first add the letter F, and then I'm going to add in the URL from the API. Depending on the documentation for your API, what you're using, for the one on OpenWeather, I'm actually going to go to the API tab up here, and I'm going to grab the current weather. I'm going to click on the API documentation. We can even see here that it says how to make an API call. So from here, we can kind of grab, this is the kind of URL that we're going to be looking for. And then after this weather question mark, these are all the different parameters. So we have things like latitude, longitude, app ID, etc. And with that app ID, that's where our API key is going to be going. But the way I'm going to be structuring my call is first I'm going to be establishing kind of the base URL. So I'm going to grab it all the way up to where it says weather question mark. So this is like the first part of the URL, and then we'll fill in the gaps with our city and our API key. So back in Visual Studio Code, in between the string here, the little quotation marks, we're going to be pasting our weather. Then on the next line, we're going to add our F again. We're going to use the Q equals, and we're going to then pass along some information. So depending on what you want or what you're passing through, in this case, we established the city. So I'm going to be looking for the city. You would then include any of the other information you want. Otherwise, we're going to be grabbing the app ID. So even if you want to copy and paste it from the website here at app ID, and this is where we're pasting in that API key, which we've established right up here. So API underscore key. And it's going to kind of paste it into the URL. And for this one, we might also have to include the ampersand units. I'm from Canada. I love the metric system. Do I love it? I don't know, but here we are. But essentially that's going to give us the temperature in Celsius. Okay, and we're pretty much already almost done. We're then going to want to establish our response. So we're going to set this to equal the requests.get, and then we're going to put our URL within here, which is what we've created and established above. Then we're going to establish our data, and this is going to equal our response.json. And essentially, this is just going to parse the response into a JSON format. Okay, now let's display this weather info as well as handle any errors in case something goes wrong. So if there's no internet connection, a valid API key, we'll know what's going on. And if it works, then we can print that message to the user. So we'll create an if statement and we'll say response.status underscore code equals 200. We're going to add our colon here. So if our request is great and it goes through, we can print the message to the user. So we can add the F, and then we'll say within a string weather in, then let's go ahead and interpolate our city. So in this case it would be Toronto, but if you put something else it will be that. And then we're going to actually use our squiggly braces again, and we're going to look at the data. We'll add our square brackets, and then we'll look for the weather tag. Outside of those brackets, we're going to add a integer, and we'll put it to be 0. Then we'll add another set of square brackets, and we'll say description. And then we'll do dot title with the empty brackets. Then we'll also go ahead and print the temperature. We're going to do something very similar. We're going to add our squiggly braces. We're going to reference the data, add the square brackets, and we're going to be looking at the main, as well as in another set of square brackets, the temp. And those should be in Celsius. So after the squiggly brackets, I'll say Celsius, which I think is how you spell it. I could be very wrong. I don't know. Spelling is not my strong suit. Then we're going to create an else statement to handle any of those errors. So if there's an error, we're going to show the message from the API. Let's go ahead and print this, and we'll say error fetching weather data. And then outside of the string, but still within the brackets, we'll add a comma. We'll say data.get. And then we're going to look for the message within the string value there. And we have a little squiggly here telling us that the temperature does need those apostrophes. Okay, let's go ahead and run our Python file and let's see what happens. Okay, I have an invalid API key. Oh my goodness, I am bad at spelling. I said OpenWeather, not OpenWeather. All right, let's run this thing again. Perfect, there we go. Well, hey, at least we know that the error response handling worked, all right? Weather in Toronto, overcast clouds, 284 Celsius. Okay. That might not be right. Let's try to change this to have units equal metric, not dash. Let's try that. I'm gonna double check the documentation. Okay, 11.42 Celsius. Yeah. If it was that high, Toronto would be in flames. It's okay to make mistakes, and I probably should have double checked the documentation a little bit more on that one. That's pretty funny though. So I think what was happening is the units were malformed, and we were seeing it in K, which would be Kelvin, and not C of Celsius. Alrighty, so we made our API call, and within our Python file, we did not actually paste our API key. That is hidden in our env file, which is, you know, if we don't have the files being shown, it is hidden as far as anybody else is concerned. Now, the next big part is when we're looking at things like GitHub, in your GitIgnore, this is where you're going to want to be hiding your env file. So the other thing to keep in mind is if you're working on GitHub for your project, in your .gitignore, and you can also do this in GitHub Desktop, you'll want to edit your file to also be hiding the .env files here. So you would want to just put .env. This will tell Git to never track or upload your .env file, even by accident. So always check the changes tab before committing. So if you are using GitHub Desktop, always double check. You could even right click, ignore, or manually add to GitIgnore as well. If you accidentally commit a key, delete the key from your provider and rotate it. Even if you've secured your env, it's still a good habit to rotate your API keys every few months, especially for production apps. So let's talk a little bit about what you learned, well, from following this video, that it's okay to make mistakes, and I'm terrible at spelling. Otherwise, how to create a .env file in Python, how to load keys securely with python-dotenv, how to make a real API call, we used OpenWeatherMap for this one, how to protect secrets using .gitignore and using GitHub Desktop, as well as how to name .env files properly on Mac and Windows, which in this case was just nothing. So if this helped, drop a like and hit subscribe, and check the description for the full code, as well as key safety tips. Remember, good devs write code, but great devs protect it. And also, dream big, code bigger, and we'll see you in the next one.